What's happening in the canine industry? For all the latest news, views, and expert opinions, stay right here for the Canine Paradigm. You'll hear from industry leaders, experts, doyens of the industry, learned colleagues, movers and shakers, and the odd randy guest. Get the latest insights and expert advice from both here and abroad from the people in the know. Now, here are your hosts, Glenn Cook and Pat Stewart. And I'm Lofty Fulton, and I'm out of here.
Glenda?
Yes.
We have to do a new ad.
We do.
It's a solemn time. Our long-time sponsor of the show, George Kittredge,
Yes.
very, very sadly passed away. And we formerly used to advertise for him his Rowdy Hound boxes.
We did.
So we don't actually know what's happened with Rowdy Hound boxes. You know anything about that?
I looked at the website. It said that they're recalibrating since their founder and boss has passed. But nonetheless, I think that you and I want to honour the memory of George Kittredge anyway. He was a friend to both of us, a hell of a good guy, and he supported us almost immediately. He was on board through and through, and I just don't want any of us to forget George. He was a terrific human being.
So we intend to continue to advertise Rowdy Hound, even though we don't know what's going on with them, in the hopes that they keep going, and that can be a bit of George's legacy that we're able to continue to promote.
I hope so.
In checking it out, we had a look to see, because we're not real good with the sponsorship. So we had a look to see who's actually paying for sponsorship. And we have a list of people to tell you that we support. And the first is our sugar mama, Barbara de Groot.
She's been with us from the start as well. Barbara's been an absolute staple in our...
She's a gem.
She is a gem.
She has a business.
She does. From the Heart Dog Training.
From the Heart Dog Training.
Yeah.
You can check it out. But she supports us as much and more than anybody ever has. So we appreciate you very much, Barbara. Another person who's supported us from the start.
The Einzelwiener.
Einzelwiener.
The Bullfed.
The Bullfed.
Yep.
It's where I get all my stuff.
Yeah.
It is, truly. It's where I get all my dog gear. If I need something, Jason's my first point of call. I don't use his shit website. He has a website. It's dog shit. I just message him directly. You guys probably should use his shit website, but I don't.
Because you don't want to message him directly and get his grumpy ire of the day.
Yeah, but do it. Get all your dog stuff from Jason. He's got everything you need. He's got all the shit that you need to train a dog for realty.
Everybody who comes to seminars and looks at mills and asks me mills questions, ask Jason.
Yeah.
Jason can point you in the right direction for getting the mill that's best suited for you.
I really like his leashes. I'm a big fan of his leash pack. That's why I sort of convinced him to do it. But anyway, get your stuff from Einzelwiener.
Yep.
Do you know who has a fantastic website and ships internationally?
My wife?
Your wife, Canine Pharmaceuticals.
I couldn't imagine her not having a good website, how much of a perfectionist she is.
Well, the products are amazing. My dog merely being alive is a walking testimonial to that. My dog, who I've retired numerous times and has come out of retirement when I've managed to get his body back to healthy, and a big part of that is related to Canine Pharmaceuticals. So check it out, everybody.
I could say so many nice and biased things about Canine Pharmaceuticals and my wife, but what I will say is ignore me. Just look at testimonials. The testimonials speak for themselves. That's where the field trials are working. What makes Narelle's day, and mine as well, is when people are emailing in and sending messages of... Well, primarily people have had no hope in the past because just everything that they were trying wasn't working, and now it is. And that is the testament that something is actually really working. And the other thing which I will add, one of the things that Narelle's told me in the past is dogs are incapable of understanding the placebo effect.
Oh, that's a good point.
So you can fake it on a human, but you can't fake it on a dog.
I never thought about that before. That's actually a really good point.
Well, my wife's actually a very smart person.
There you go.
So she's told me that humans are subject to the placebo effect where dogs are not. So it either works or it doesn't on dogs.
There you go. That makes total sense.
Yep.
There's one other person who puts a fair amount of work into this show.
Yeah.
It's me.
Yeah. Funny about that.
And I have a digital product that you can buy. If you go to my website, seriousdogbusiness.com, right now I've got 2 courses available to you. The Overview, which is a small course where you could learn how I teach.
Yep.
But the other one is the Wave Tops, which is a bigger course. It's everything I know about dog training. Well, it's not everything. It's a lot of what I know about dog training.
Yeah,
Check it out.
terrific. Yeah.
$500 dues. That's all it's going to cost you.
I recommended when people are saying, what do I do? How do I get in the industry? I recommend them to your course.
Oh, wonderful. Thanks, sir. All right, on with the show. Welcome back to the Canine Paradigm. I'm your host, Pat Stewart, and I'm joined in the studio for the first time in a long time by my co-host, Glenn Cook.
In person after 4 weeks. More
It'd
weeks.
be like 6 weeks since we've actually
it'd be
sat
like
here.
6 weeks. Yeah, you're right.
We did it.
Yeah, we did it.
We're here. Good for us. Let's get into it.
Yeah, let's riff.
Let's just hook in. We're still working through a lot of stuff, but we're going to bounce around to one that has caught our eye today. We're going to talk about the topic of rescues. Now, this question comes to us from Nikki Feeney, and she says, I would love to see discussions about rescues and their ever-increasing criteria, limitations for people to adopt a dog. I wasn't able to adopt a rescue because I had another dog at home. And I have to be working, but less than 4 hours a day. Yet, if I am retirement age, I'll be too old. How am I going to afford the dog? I found a dog on Facebook who needed help. She was a mess. There is no doubt I saved her. She's a bloody brilliant dog now. In the UK media, I see so much about rescues being full because we are throwing dogs away. Now we are back to work after lockdowns is the real story. I feel a lot of the time rescue centres get personal about potential adoptees and dogs are missing out on potential homes. Is this a global issue? It's a murky issue, but I would love to know your thoughts.
Before we get into the meat of that, have you ever seen that skit on Instagram? There's an Asian comedian doing a story about how he's walking through the park with his dog and this lady comes up to him and looks at his dog and then she's got her dog with one leg and she goes, and he goes, what's wrong? And she goes, your dog's very nice and all, but, my dog's a rescue. The whole thing is hilarious. It's one of the funniest things. Like I've watched it probably more than 10 times and laughed at it every single time I see it. The reason why I want to bring that up is there's this weird elitism that's now surrounding rescue dogs.
Now, or how long do you reckon that's been around?
It's not right now, but it's gathering momentum.
Yeah.
It's kind of a weird thing that rescue dogs are seen as this complete different entity rather than just dogs. It's kind of like these dogs are so damaged and special that they need a particular type of person to come down, swoop down from the heavens, swaddle the dog up, and then ascend into Valhalla with this dog. And that's the only way this dog can live its life because it's so special needs that it needs such a special person with care and empathy beyond the average person. Well, that sounds very derogatory of people that want to care for and look after rescue dogs because I get it, like they are dogs that have been abandoned and they are dogs that have been fucked over and there's a whole bunch of things that rescue dogs have had a very unfair start to. But one of the things I will tell you about dogs that I know in particular is dogs are incredibly malleable. Like if they do go into a facility and the facility people are giving them adequate stimulation and they're looking after the dogs and they're housing them and feeding them well, these dogs don't suffer. They actually thrive. And you talk to people like Amy Sadler, who started the organisation with a group of people called Dogs Playing for Life. Now, she's one of many people around the world who have got incredible facilities that have orchestrated for behaviourists and trainers and people in the industries to come in and say, how can we make this better? How can we bring slate meals in? How can we have Jay come down and do GSR training for bully breeds and those type of dogs?
Well, the whole thing of Dogs Playing for Life is that they do actual play sessions with the dogs,
Correct.
right? They actually teach the staff how to not just play with dogs themselves, but also how to have play group sessions so the dogs get to play with each other and be much more fulfilled and therefore be much more rescuable.
Absolutely. And then you listen to people like Cameron Ford and the like who talk about detection and how even Noseworks was derived from people going in and doing extra curriculum with shelter dogs and finding that, hey, this is really enhancing the dog's lifestyle and reducing significant amounts of aggression because it's like the old saying that we talk about in society or even with children that idle hands are the devil's tools. Primarily that means if you've got nothing to do and you're bored, you'll find something to do, and often it's the wrong thing to do. Dogs get very much like that as well. But if they're locked up into a facility for, let's say, 23 and a half hours of a 24-hour day, and they get half an hour to get out to a yard, sniff around shit, and then they get thrown straight back in there, you betcha they're going to go kennel mad.
Yeah.
So, yes, some of those dogs in those facilities that aren't looked after properly and people don't really care about the altruism of looking after dogs properly and doing the job correctly, yes, they're going to suffer at the hands of those people. But there are more and more facilities that are doing things right, setting the dogs up right. They're thriving in there. They're eating well, they're getting good sponsored by reasonable types of foods, not the types that I would like to give them, but nonetheless, they're still getting a better than a bad lifestyle that they might have got otherwise. So they're getting looked after, they're getting the holistic care that they need, and they're also getting the stimulation that they require to be a thriving member of society. But it's kind of got like child adoption, where there's so much red tape I know this from people that I know who are amazing people, and they had to literally sell a kidney to adopt a child, and yet they are the most amazing people. They're cashed up, they live well, they own their house, they have a business. And I'm not saying that I disagree that there isn't red tape before children get into a house, because God forbid you ever let some crazed pedophile get hold of a child and stuff like that. You'd never forgive yourself. I agree, there should be criteria, but how much? So I think this is bleeding into rescue now, where there is this high level of elitism with some people, not all people, but the red tape and the fanfare that they actually put in the way is very intrusive of actually getting a dog into a home and out of the facility.
Yeah, I have to be completely honest. I haven't had a lot of first-hand experience with any rescues. When I first started doing this professionally, I had anticipated building rapport with a couple of rescues and sort of working with them. And I had a pretty negative first couple of experiences. And so I just kind of went like, oh, okay, I'm not going to do that. And, you know, I've trained with plenty of dogs that were secondhand, you know, like I've never vetted anyone by saying I don't work with rescue dogs or anything like that. And certainly when I was training pets exclusively, like when I first started doing this professionally, I'd say most of your work is with rescues, with rescue dogs, I mean. But I haven't had a lot of firsthand experience with the actual places, the shelters and stuff like that. But not for lack of trying. Like I did initially try quite hard because I just kind of figured like, well, that's the place, right? Like that's where there's a surplus of dogs that need training. And they weren't very interested in having someone help with the dogs. And similarly,
especially when they find out you're a balanced trainer.
That was it.
Yeah,
that was it. And so to be totally transparent, I think I was still in the army. And me and Sam had the Val video series, right? And the first year that came out, we went to the Dog Lovers Expo. So I had this idea. I thought, yeah, why not, right? Like we'll take her. We'd only just finished the video series. So she was somewhere around 18 months old, give or take. And we had the whole video series. So we get a booth at the thing. And it cost a lot of money. I can't remember exactly, but I think it was like $3,000 or something like that for 2 days at the Dog Lovers Expo with the smallest booth we could get, the smallest 1 by 2 meter thing.
Yep. One person in a chair, you can basically get into it.
Yeah. So we had a little table with a computer on it. And on the computer, we just had the video series. And we had it so that people could like buy it there on the spot on that computer, but also they could preview it and check it out and see what it was. And we had the dog there, right? So it was like, hey, you can watch this dog get raised in this entire video series. And we were offering to other people there, like partner program sort of things. Like, hey, if you promote this, we'll give you 50%, right? It's a $100 product. It wasn't an expensive thing. But the way that we used to offer to people was you get like a 10% discount code, which allows you to give the purchaser 10% off, and we'll go halves in what's left of it. Now, I thought that would be something that a lot of rescues would jump on. For me at the time, not being in the dog world, right? Like I was still, I hadn't like figured the place out and I hadn't really dealt with any of that, but none of them were interested.
Is this in the early days where you were starry-eyed and you had pie 100%. In the sky beliefs?
Yeah, 100% it was.
Yeah.
And then the thing was as well, so then at the Dog Lovers Expo, there were all these like all the different rescues were there. None of them were really interested in partnering. They really had no interest, especially once they realized that we were balanced trainers. So our booth was like 1 by 2 meters and it cost us like $3,000 or something like that. Each one of the rescues was in a minimum 3 by 3 booth and they didn't pay for them. So the 3 by 3 booths were $9,000 or something to have. It was crazy. I can't remember the numbers, but it was crazy, which they didn't pay for. And none of them had any dogs or anything there. So like it confused me a lot. Like I was like, what's happening here? It was before I was in the space. And then I had a couple of like really bad experiences where there was a particular rescue that was saying that they had a dog that I bred. And I've never bred a dog in my life. I've never bred a fucking dog. I was like, I sure as fuck isn't for me. I don't know what that dog is, but I didn't breed it. Not a fucking chance. But I'd appreciate if you stopped telling people that I did. I don't know what the end is there. And I messaged them and they never wrote back, never acknowledged me, never anything. So I had a pretty sort of like, oh, okay. But that's not to say I'm anti-rescue. And
Of course not. Neither of us are anti-rescue.
No, not in the slightest.
Very supportive.
But I have seen some red flags. And I think that there's, like all things, there's plenty of rescues and people involved in it that do a fucking incredible job and work their guts out and rehome as many dogs as they can at huge personal cost, both in time and money. And we've had people on the show who are specialists of that, like we've had people deeply involved in that and we've supported that as much as we can. And I've since worked with and done training with people who I know who work in rescue and like it been through them directly, not through the rescue itself. But I definitely have had some pretty negative experiences and I have had plenty of clients that have had negative experiences as well. And I've seen, the problem is I think it's a very broad thing that we experience in that we see some rescues that just won't seem to rehome a dog, right? Like it seems borderline impossible, like Nikki's pointing out here, it seems borderline impossible to get a dog from them. And then there's been other rescues that I've worked for the person that they've ultimately homed the dog with, where I get there and I'm like, holy fuck, they've stitched you up here. This is a very dangerous dog that you have in your home, right? Like this is a very dangerous situation that you've been put in. This dog's completely unsuitable for you. Like this is a fucking disaster. So it's the full spectrum, right? And I think that the problem is our industry is entirely unregulated and so are rescues, right? Like anybody can call themselves a rescue. And I think that that's part of the issue as well, is that we see a lot of people who have like their own rescue and people can't say I'm doing my inverted comma things, but they're just puppy farming and selling their mixed breed dogs as rescues. And so that really dilutes the message of the good rescues and the people who are doing the things correctly. So I think it's a very complex and difficult topic.
It's also along the vein of what we were discussing last week when we were talking about service dogs and my admiration for many of the dogs that I saw in the United States who are true service dogs. I've heard the horror stories over there as I have here, and people who have robbed our NDIS over here of money and resources with bullshit dogs that aren't doing the work properly. And it's not that the dogs are bullshit, it's the people are bullshit. And I think one of the key areas that you're bringing to point here is some of the crazy gatekeepers that get in front of these organizations like dog clubs and rescue organizations and so forth. Like some of the people in there are outrageously, insanely crazy people. They're such a detriment to the industry. Like they're a detriment to people no matter where they get to. But it's finally a time where they feel like they can exact some power and glorification of themselves onto other people. Like it's sickening sometimes when I see it, because I think, why the fuck would you put that person? It's like having a vampire running the blood bank. Like you think, why would you have that person in control of the adoption of perfectly good dogs into perfectly good homes where they put this political fucking red tape that's a mile thick? By the time people get through the end of it, they go, oh, it's just not worth it. Because then somebody else will go to them, hey, I've got old mate Joe down the road who will give you a dog. And then they go there, and that might be a mismatched dog where they would have had a selection of perfectly able dogs that they could go to, but it's just that this person with a head full of fuckery has gone, no, you have to hop on one leg, sing the national anthem, whistle at the same time, drink a beer through the straw in your nose, and do all this crazy criteria before you can get a fucking dog out of there.
What's your worst rescue story?
It's along the lines of that where you were talking about it before with your personal disdain of how you were treated, if that's what you would call it.
Yeah, well, it was just peculiar. Like, I have a reason, like this is 10 years ago, so I still 10 years ago had a pretty reasonable skill set in dog training.
Yeah.
And was like, hey, I just got out of the army. I'm looking to do a lot of dog training. What do you got for me? And they were like, fuck off. I was like, oh, okay.
Early on in rescue, I used to work at this place in Melbourne called Homestead Kennels. I used to run my own business there for a long time.
Hang on, let me clarify that. It's a boarding kennel, but you had the training department of the kennel or something.
That's right. Yeah. So I was a subcontractor of the company, and they would get the boarding fee and I would put training on top of that, and I'd come down and train the dogs. And it was a good relationship. I used to turn up there, train the dogs, and then just do my own thing. But I also had a really good relationship with the organisation down the road, which was called the Blue Cross. And that was the first time that I was involved with a true rescue organisation before it was like in vogue. Like it's very in vogue now. It's like this mystical beast. But back then it was just dogs that came into kennels in the Blue Cross. They had their own kennel down the road, and they would call me down sometimes and just say, hey, can we pay you to come down and do a bunch of assessments on dogs and let us know what dogs are safe and what dogs aren't. It was lovely. Really cool people. I used to go down there and help train the staff, keep them safe. And I was doing this week with our staff from one of our facilities, teaching them to understand and acknowledge canine behavior. So when they're doing matching and moving dogs around, transporting and all that sort of stuff, keeps them safe. They can assist them in diagnosing early signs of what dogs are doing and how to keep them safe and how to keep the dog safe, and basically how to acknowledge a win-win environment to the best of their capabilities. And then also to come back to me and say, if you're stuck, call me down there and I'll come and assist you with it. And that's what I had with the Blue Cross as well. We had this great symbiotic relationship where they would send dogs to me for training when they got rescued and so forth, and I would go down there and help them out. And most of the times, because they were a rescue facility, sometimes I'd go down there and they'd pay me to do one job and I'd just do like 2 or 3 others gratis because non-profit organisation, they didn't have a lot of money, and the money that they did, they were putting into looking after dogs. I would even recommend them. I had professional partnerships with dog food companies and so forth. So I'd said, go and talk to the Blue Cross. It would be a great feel-good story for the community because they're doing good things with rescue dogs. And we didn't even really call them rescue dogs back then. It was just basically shelter dogs.
Yeah, shelter dog or pound dog.
Yeah. So let's fast forward to a couple of years. Before I left Victoria to go into New South Wales, I went down to another very large worldly organisation, won't name names. One of the staff there did the NDTF, and they had this dog in there that they wanted to. The staff were very much in favour of having this dog rescued, but the corporate side were not in favour. And the staff asked me if I would come down there and look at the dog. Corporate side said, not paying, but if he wants to come down, we won't stop him. So I did go down on the premises that, I thought I'm going to donate some time, and I think it's the right thing to do. The staff were very concerned about it. I'd only met with one of the staff, but they said there's at least 6 or 7 staff down there that are very concerned about this principle. And I said, yep, let's go down and have a look at the dog. Went down and had a look at the dog. The dog was fine. The dog was a little bit aroused and overstimulated by other dogs, but nothing that couldn't be resolved, especially with training. I had an entourage of people following me around there telling me, you can't do this, you can't do that, you're not allowed to tug the dog on the lead, you're not allowed to do this, you're not allowed to do that. And I said, how is the dog supposed to get any sort of advantage in this environment? How are we supposed to get a win out of this if basically you're saying to me, like, I want to put you in a boxing match, but you have to hop on one leg and tie one arm behind your back and also wear one eye patch over one eye against an opponent who's got all of the, like legs, arms and everything unencumbered. So went down there, had a look at the dog, lovely dog, no problem. The dog would have rehabilitated into a family home, no problem. Just a little bit headstrong, but nothing outrageous that I saw whatsoever. Like, I spent hours down there. It wasn't like just a quick half an hour, hop in there and have a look. I went down there, had a coffee, had a look at the dog. Then we had a break and I said, let's have a break and take the dog into a new environment and have a look again. So we're sure about what we're seeing. So we did it again. Dog wasn't really a problem at all. They killed the dog anyway. For me, that was my horror story. I just thought there was no rehabilitation scheme here for this dog. There was one in the UK, I think it was. It was either the UK or Ireland where the council seized the dog, and this was a long-running incident where this dog was basically left in squalor in this awful shelter. People all over the world were campaigning to fight for this dog. It didn't end well. The person ended up getting the opportunity to get the dog back or something like that, but just the whole principle around it was just fucking outrageous. Some of those circumstances are just impossible sometimes, and it literally hovers around who the gatekeeper is in the industry at the time. When it becomes political or politically motivated, or it becomes a power trip, let's say we're talking about child adoption or dog rescue, they're fucked. They're very rarely going to get a good or happy ending out of it because you've got some maniacal power broker that's controlling all the pieces and stopping that happily ever after story from arriving. Because I know people who would have been perfectly suited for taking a dog in. I mean, there's people out here who have got the wrong dog because the right dog was denied of them.
Yeah.
And that's a fuck around.
Yeah. So I think that's probably the big issue. Like, I think it's I want to be careful not to be just seen to be like shit-mouthing rescue and to, like, we've known plenty of people involved in rescue. We've supported a lot of rescue. We've had
vast majority of support for rescue groups.
Yeah.
If anybody has got that was shit-mouthing rescue,
I'm
not talking about that. I'm talking about those maniacal gatekeepers.
Yeah. So I think that's the issue. Like, they're the ones that sort of come to mind when people bring this sort of stuff up. Early days had a client They had this dog from rescue. It was a Staffy Kelpie cross.
Yeah.
Right? For people not in Australia, we pretty much, what do you think the percentage of dogs in rescue that are Staffy Kelpie crosses are?
Oh, there's heaps.
Like in Australia, that's our standard rescue
There's
dog.
a predominant amount of Staffies in shelters, and there's a predominant amount of Kelpies in shelters, and there's a prominent amount of people in rural areas who have got Staffies and Kelpies, so the likelihood of those two dogs getting together and fucking is huge.
Now, a Staffy Kelpie cross can be a hell of a fucking dog, right? Like, I was just in Darwin working with the bomb dogs up there.
Oh, yeah. How was that?
It was great, but a lot of them are Staffy Kelpie crosses, of
course
right?
they are.
Because they get all their dogs from shelters, from rescues, whatever, because they just need good nerves and a lot of drive. That's it. That's all they need. And those dogs can have that.
Yeah.
they can be a lot. They can have both Kelpies and Staffies can both be fucking intense dogs, right?
And up that way too, there's a lot of Indigenous villages and there are a lot of village dogs that are like that.
Although those guys, they get them from all over the place. They're not just restricted to getting them in Darwin, because the way it works for the army dog handlers is their dog that they train on their course is here in Sydney. So their dogs come from all over the place. It's not just up there. Anyway, I digress. So Staffy Kelpie crosses, for people who have never seen one, can be a lot of fucking dog. They can be extreme high drive and extremely intense dogs, and you can get...
And powerful. And with no off switch.
Yeah, that's the issue, right?
You know, like the power of a Staffy with the endurance of a Kelpie is like TNT and Gelignite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So these people had... I don't know what rescue they got it from. It was so long ago, I don't remember, but I'm not even sure I knew properly. But they were an elderly couple and they were rich. So they fit the bill perfectly, because it's one of these things that Nikki says here about, like, to meet the requirements, you'd have to be a retired person. So that's exactly what they were. These guys were rich. I mean, not rich, like they weren't billionaires, but they had a big ball and house. I remember pulling up going like, oh, fuck, should charge these people more. They had a big ball and house. Neither of them worked.
Yep.
And they had this big, beautiful yard that the dog was just in permanently and had fucking destroyed.
Yep.
Because it was just an off-tap Staffy Kelpie cross. And I'm sure that it would have been an awesome dog, but it was way too much dog for them, like way too much. And the issue was that they did fit through the gateway of being what the rescue wanted. They had a big yard, which is one of the restrictions. They had high fence because they live in the suburbs with a big, beautiful house. They had the time to be home with the dog all the time, and they were in a really good financial situation. So they're on paper, they're perfect dog owners, right? Like that you would absolutely want to put a dog with. But they're like 70 years old. So like they're not moving real fast and they're not able to handle like an extremely high drive off tap dog. And everything that I was suggesting that they do, they really couldn't do, right? Like they couldn't interact with the dog. Like the moment that you went outside, the dog was just jumping all over them like chainsaws. And these are people, they were getting hurt by the dog, right? Like they're thin skin, they were bleeding, they were covered in, and like it wasn't like it was an aggressive dog. There was nothing.
It's just overexcitable.
It just was way too much dog for them.
Abundance of energy.
Yeah, way too much. I was like, I think that this is a wonderful dog for someone else. But then it's like, no, we love the dog, but also we can't go anywhere near it. I was like, but explain to me how you love the dog, right? Like I remember sort of sitting there being like, I get that you feel a responsibility to this dog and you've made the commitment and you're not just giving it back to the rescue. I get that. And me and you are going to have to do a lot of fucking work, but this is not the kind of dog that you wanted. These are retired people that wanted an easy dog that will chill in the house with them. And I guess that you just don't get many of them in rescue, right? Or when they're in rescue, they're out fast, right? They get adopted quickly, the easy dogs. But I remember being at the time, I remember thinking, because it was early days in my training, I remember thinking like, holy fuck, this is a proper dangerous situation. This is not a dangerous dog, but this situation that has been created here is dangerous. And I spent a long time trying to convince them to rehome the dog. Like I was like, we can privately rehome the dog. The rescue don't need to know anything about it, right? And they were like, no, the rescue, like that's in the, we can't even do that. Like if anything goes wrong, the dog has to go back. But under the threat of if you bring it back, we're euthanizing it. Like it was.
Yeah.
And so like I never saw that contract. It's a lot of hearsay, and it's me remembering something from 10 years ago. But like I remember thinking at the time, like this is a fucking disaster. And in the end, we ended up getting it to the point where the dog was never going to be an inside dog the way that they wanted, but they could at least walk it to the place where they could then throw the chucket for it, which is not good dog training. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not happy with the outcome of how it went, but the dog stopped hurting them and it became livable. But I don't know that that dog had a great life. Like, I think that it remained a dog that lived in the yard, was intermittently got affection, but mostly what it just lived for was going down to the park to have the ball put in the chucket and thrown back and forth 3 times a day for 10 minutes. You know what I mean? So that's my worst, which is not that bad, to be honest. Like, that, it's not like I've been to the house where the dog's trying to kill someone and it's the super dangerous dog, but it was very much the wrong fit. And the problem, I think, is that it fits exactly what Nikki's kind of talking about here, is that, like, on paper, that's a great outcome. That's a couple that fit the bill exactly, and a dog got rehomed and didn't get euthanized, but it was a disaster for them. And it was a clear situation of, they told me they loved the dog, but they resented that dog. Like, that dog is a fucking disaster for them, and it fucked up their life. You know what I mean?
It's probably not that they don't love the dog, but it's more of a guilt thing than it is a passion thing.
Yeah.
I think those sort of situations regularly end badly. There's plenty of times where I've heard not only people involved in some facet of rescue, and again, they're gatekeeper people, it's not the staff who yearn for the dog to go into a home which will validate the existence of the dog, but it's very much in sort of that breeder correlation as well, because breeding and rescue is not so separated from each other. It's very closely entwined with each other. I've known breeders before where I'll say, oh, where and how do you sell your puppies? And they'll go, oh, it depends on what car they drive up the driveway in, where they're very enamored by the wealth of a person rather than the capability of a person. Now, to me, I don't give when I was selling my puppies, I didn't give a fuck if you had $50 million or you had $5. There were some people that came to me, which were one of the girls that bought a dog off me once. She was not working at the time. Her partner was. She was in between jobs, and she said to me, I'm in between jobs at the moment, but I can guarantee you I'll love this puppy like nothing else. The only thing I want to do is come around and have a look at your backyard and just make sure that it's safe to contain a dog. And I said, because this little Rottweiler will grow up to be a big, powerful Rottweiler. And I said, you specifically want a male? And I said, I'm breeding drivey dogs. And back then I was breeding drivey dogs. So I said, I'll make sure that you don't get one that's too in the pet facet, but I need to see your backyard and I need to see that you have commitment. She said, absolutely. When would you like to come? And I said, let's go now. So she came and met me, and that's how I met her. She came down to Homestead, and I said, I'm knocking off. Let's go. I said, you live like 2 minutes away from where I live, so let's go. She goes, yeah, cool. I followed her back there, met her partner, had a look in the backyard. There was some wandering Jew in there, and I said, before this puppy comes, if you get it, if I agree to it, I want this wandering Jew chopped up and gone and, like completely taken out. She goes, I'll do it tonight, but after you leave. And I said, yep, cool. Got home, sent me an email with the backyard completely fucking cut down, did everything. I told her there were holes under the fence that needed to be addressed. They'd got bricks, put them all, like this is before they even had a chance of getting the puppy. And I just said, that's absolutely fantastic, guys. All right, you've done everything. Come around, meet the pups. And I said, they'll be ready to see in 4 weeks. Came round, first people round. They came and sat down in the lounge room. They said, you tell us what we should do. And I said, all right, that's fantastic. I'm convinced you guys are great for getting a pup. That dog is this one up here.
Oh, really? Yeah,
it's
right.
the one on the wall that people usually see in the background when they see any videos of me talking or anything else like that. That's Chaos.
Yeah.
And the girl's name was Wendy, and she became a trainer. She was inspired to become a trainer down at Australian Dog Training, and Chaos lived with Wendy until the day he died.
Mate, that strikes a chord with me because this is one of the funny things, and I know I've discussed this in the past, but every time like a dog training movie comes out, whether it's John Wick or Dog with Channing Tatum, like people lose their minds. And the whole Mallee community's like, you can't own a Mallee. Like no one's allowed to have one except me. I'm the fucking only person on the planet that can handle a Mal. And then very often when people get that dog and people like, you're like, oh, you can't handle it. You don't know what you're doing. It's like, yeah, but you don't know who you're dealing with. Like, of course there could be people who like there's a spectrum everywhere, right?
Yes,
there's people who don't know what the fuck they're doing, but there's other people that are like, yeah, no, but this is step one for me. Yep. Like, this is how I get into this, Like I didn't have a fucking clue what I was doing when I got into dogs, and here we are, right? Yep. Still haven't got a fucking clue. But that's the reality. Like, I think that there are a lot of gatekeepers. It's not just rescue. Like, no way. There's tons of people who are really think that their ability to handle dogs is special and unique, and that nobody else will ever be able to do it the way that they do, and so therefore nobody else should be allowed to have a dog. Or that someone's skill set when they're here now is representative of their skill set forever, rather than looking at someone and going like, exactly like you did then, and you go, okay, cool, like just convince me that you're on board. You're going to take this seriously.
Be proactive. That was the one thing that I got fooled once really badly with a puppy, and that was a tragic story. Didn't end tragically because I went round there and took the dog off them. Took pictures of the squalid conditions the dog was living. The only reason I found out is because my mate lived. It was 2 hours away from where I lived, and my mate lived up there. And I said, I haven't heard from these people from ages. I said, can you go around and do a meet and greet with them and just check the dog for me? And my kennel was called Schoenberg, and I had what we call the Schoenberg Day, where we'd have all the dogs come down and I'd run free training for them. So we had a swim and gym place in Melbourne, my former business partner and I. All the dogs were welcome down there, and they'd come down. They pay for swims and stuff like that, but I'd do training with them for free. If they wanted to do bite work, I'd do bite work. I'd try and get them involved in schutzen and all those sort of things. We had a great time together. We had a really good time. I'd throw on the barbecues, and it was just a nice day where everybody'd stay connected. And even the people that were more rural to that, we would find a way to connect with each other. People used to write me Christmas cards all the time, send pictures of the dogs, but this one dog just vanished. So I got my mate to check on it, and he went round there and he looked over the fence. He goes, oh, mate, he doesn't even look like a Rottweiler. It's terrible. And I said, take pictures, send them to me. And he took pictures. Mate, I was fucking weeping. Like, such a great little dog. And this is the thing, I really get this for breeders. For breeders that are invested in this, and I'm not talking about people who are just milling puppies out, but for people who are invested in breeding, those little pups used to be born in our house. In the spare bedroom, the whelping box used to be in there, and we'd get to know the identities of each one of those little puppies. And each one of them had their own character and their own personality. And by the time they're crawling around, we'd take them outside, have them out on the grass and, like running around. And we had a bungalow in the back where the dogs would run under the bungalow and chase each other around the backyard. So you get to know all about them. And, I used to be so invested. I'd take journals and notes on, and a lot of people that I knew involved in ethical breeding and great breeding standards were doing these sort of things with their puppies. So it wasn't unusual. Like, I'm not talking about something that I just went above and beyond, because I mentored and learned from other people that did all this sort of stuff. But I loved it. It was so scientific for me. Like, that was my science lab, to go out there and watch these puppies performing these amazing and characteristic, and the growth, how they would change and how malleable they were, or what one would become one day would be completely different the next day, and then it would change and change and change and change. It was fucking fascinating. And you love these little pups. They were family to you. So for this person to fool me and get the dog off me, and then to put the dog into such a squalid condition, I drove there. They weren't home. I took the dog. They rang me and I said, hey, I've got photos of the dog. I'm refunding all of your money. And I said, I shouldn't have to. And I said, because I had contracts. Like, I had contracts basically that were drawn up by a solicitor that said, if there's any evidence of mistreatment of the dog, I can reclaim the dog. Mm-hmm. Gave their money back. And I said, I fucking dare you to take this up with me. And they never did. They just left it. So I took the dog. He came and stayed with me for 3 or 4 months. I fattened him up, made him look like a Rottweiler again, addressed all the behavioural issues that he had that I could, and then I gave him to somebody as a rescue. Mm-hmm. Somebody came round, they were appealing, same sort of thing. Loved that dog until the very day he died. The family was so heartbroken when he died. They rang me up and they said, we stayed in contact, but they said, I want to tell you, he passed away. And they were devastated. The girls lived with their mum and dad. They were just a very, very close family. And I said, guys, if you ever want another dog from me, you let me know and you've got it. And I said, you were everything that I wanted and expected of somebody who should be looking after, like a working type of dog, but a dog, just a dog, the way they cared, the way that if they were ever unsure of what they did. And I told them, I said, if you're ever unsure of what you need to do, call me. Just give me a call. There's no finances attracted to it. Just tell me what you need and I'll advise you on what to do. And they used to do that. We had a great relationship with those type of things. And again, I attribute that to my mentors who taught me how to breed and how to look after dogs. And even when some people would run into lifestyle or financial restraints, and they would ring me up and tell me, and they'd say, Glenn, the last thing I want to do is give up the dog, but we can't even look after ourselves. It's impossible. And they've said, we've exhausted all the opportunities. And they've said, I know you probably think I'm a shit person. And they said, we'll do everything we can, but we need to find another home for the dog. I appreciated that from them. They never got judgment for me from it. I say, all right, what do I need to do to step in? And they just said, just please find us a home where we can transfer the other dog. They said, you can't believe we're fucking heartbroken over this, but we can't feed ourselves and the dog. Like, it's impossible. Only happened a very, very small amount of times, but always used to help people. I had waiting lists of people who said, want a puppy or something like that. So I would help the rescue transition of these dogs. So for me, that was an integral part. If you breed these fucking things, you got to look after them as well. Like, you got to try and do the right thing as much as you can. Later in life, as I've been involved with this, there's been people who rang me up and said, I need you to come and get this dog. And I said, guys, I can't. I've already got a rescue dog here, or I've got 2 dogs I'm trying to rehome. I can't take this dog on top of that right now, but I will put people your way and try and do the best thing you can. You can't always break your neck for every fucking given situation all the time, but you need to try and do the best you can with what you got. And I think that's just an issue lacking sometimes, where people get carried away with it, or they don't care about it, or they become maniacal about it. And as I said, they get very fixated on who can have the dog. All I wanted to know, and I think this is where I'm talking about the proactivity of people involved in rescues and so forth, what they should know is, are you going to look after this dog? What's your house and facilities like? Yes, there should be some red tape, but it doesn't need to be so thick that it restricts good people from having the opportunity of having a loving lifestyle of a worthy dog, where that dog can then get out of the facility.
Have I ever told you the story of my dog Ernie? Have I ever told you the full story of that dog?
Many times.
But how we ended up with him, I told you. I can't remember if I've ever spoken about it in the podcast, but when me and Jane first moved in together, we moved into this.
Didn't he run away and start coming over to your place?
No. So we moved into this big, huge house in Balmain with a bunch of other people, right? Like, it was a big share house.
Yeah.
And it was a big house, a big yard. And immediately I was like, hey, we should get a dog, right? Like, why not? This is, what year was this? This is like 2005 maybe?
So 20 years ago.
Yeah, like 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And so we get out the trading post. You remember, like, that's where...
Yeah, the trading post was the...
Yeah, it was like, came out every Thursday, and it was an actual newspaper where people sold stuff. This is like, pre-eBay.
Do you know that's where I bought Harley from?
Yeah, well, that's where you got dogs from.
The greatest dog I've ever had in my life, by a fucking country mile, I bought him out of the trading post.
Yeah, well, that's where you got dogs from.
That's where you got dogs from.
That's how you did it.
That's where you got most of your shit from.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's how you sold your cars, all that sort of
exactly.
stuff. Yeah.
Tell him he's dreaming.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
But... So we're looking for a dog and get the trading post, and I wanted a pitty because at the time my sister had this incredible pit bull, right, who went on to just be the most amazing dog, lived to 17. Like, all the bullshit stories you hear about the nanny pit bull? Like, yes. She had that. Like, she had the quintessential proper game pitty that was dog aggressive only when, like, she was a very dominant dog, right? Yep. So, like, dog aggressive when another dog was interested, but wasn't a headache generally, right? Yep. At the time, like, I used to talk about how well trained that dog was. And now in retrospect, like, that dog wasn't trained at all, just made good choices. Like, it just was a wonderful dog that did everything right?
Isn't that amazing? That absent of trainers and behaviorists and medications and everything getting in the way, that people still had amazing and productive lifestyles with their dogs.
Yeah, and like, mind you, what I'll say is, like, my sister is good with everybody and everything, you know what I mean? She understands needs, and so she looked after the dog well and did everything that it needed, but she's not a dog trainer.
But mate, going back even beyond me, I remember watching one of my family friends who had this amazing Doberman, and he was an amazing Doberman. Like, I was a kid at the time, and this dog was fucking incredible. And this guy wasn't a professional dog trainer. He was a business guy, but he just was invested in telling his dog what to do and how to behave. And those sort of things existed. Now, don't get me wrong, they don't exist with the flashiness of today, but people still interacted with their dogs, and dogs were incredibly robust, and they fit into lifestyles, and if they were told to get out of the way or get in the car or go out the backyard or do this or do that, they did it.
Yeah.
Absent of people having to know, like, all of the science behind dog training. Doesn't mean that I don't think that people should learn these sort of things, because now we know it. It's not a clock that I want to unwind. But I guess what I'm stressing is how incredible and how malleable dogs are.
Yeah.
And how they've made this incredible parallel lifestyle into our lives.
Yeah, for sure. So anyway, I want a pitty.
Yep.
Right? Because my sister's got one. The only pitty that I really know is that one, and it's the best dog on the planet, right? So I'm like, oh, well, they're all like that.
Did you have it from a puppy?
Yeah, she got it. There's an interesting story about sort of how she got that dog. It's another story, but
Okay.
it was a proper like game pitty. Like It was the real deal. But was just this wonderful dog.
Was it pedigree dog? Like, was there?
No.
Back when I started training dogs, there were two lines of pitties that you either had Jeep or Red Boy in your bloodline.
It was Red Boy.
Okay.
Yeah. But the real deal,
Yep.
and people who knew pitties would stop you to talk about it. She was so quintessential pit bull.
Yep.
Jacked, smaller than people, like think of with it, like just a perfect dog, right? And
Yep.
was just amazing in the house, amazing with the kids. I personally, like, this is no shit. I wouldn't believe if someone told me this. I watched that dog later, much, much later in life when it was older. I was there looking after my nephew. I can't remember why I was there looking after him, but it's just me. He was maybe like 2 and the dog, and he was falling asleep. And as he was sitting there watching cartoons, and as he rolled backwards, that dog dove to catch him. Like,
Wow.
as he was like falling asleep and kind of rolling back, that dog like got up and got under him so that he had a backrest of the dog.
Yeah,
right?
nice.
Like, the dog loved the kids. Like, all the bullshit that people say about pitties, and we as dog trainers go, yeah, whatever. It was that, right?
Yeah.
It was one of those dogs. So I want a pitty. And we go and see a bunch of different pitty, but none of them were the same, right? Because this dog was a 1 in a million freak. And so I hadn't found the one. I'd always had border collies growing up. And so we thought, oh, well, we'll look at that. And Jane had Dobermans. And I was like, I don't want a Doberman. Right? Even back then, I didn't want a Doberman. Even when I knew nothing about dogs, I was like, I want a Doberman. Anyway, so we start looking for border collies. And there in the trading post is this 7-year-old border collie who needs rehoming just for 12 months. And so we had moved into this giant house and we only got 12-month lease on it. And so I was like, oh, this is fucking perfect, because we don't know for sure that we're going to have this house and this living situation beyond 12 months. This dog just needs looking after for 12 months. This is perfect for us, right? Like, this is a try before you buy kind of fucking situation. So, and it said that he was border collie. So we call the lady and go to see her, and she lives up in Northern Beaches. Anyway, through like a freak of circumstance, turns out we're related, right? Because my parents are from the Northern Beaches. And so it turns out like she's like my dad's cousin or something like
wow.
that. Like, they didn't
What are
know
the
each other.
chances?
Yeah, like 1 in a million, right?
But how
They
did
didn't-
you make that connection?
because I mentioned to them, they were in like a weird part of the Northern Beaches. And I was like, no, I know my way around up here pretty well. I've got family up here. And they were like, oh, who's your family? We've been here forever. And I was like, I told them. And they were like, oh, blah, blah, blah. And it wasn't like they didn't know each other, but they knew people that knew each other. It was a loose connection. So they were like, oh, cool. We've had a bunch of people come and look at this dog. You're the ones, because we know family connections,
Yeah.
right? But he had a broken leg. And so it turns out this dog, his name's Ernie, he's not a border collie at all. He's some kind of mongrel border collie, right? Like he was black and white,
Yeah.
right? But he's mad storm phobic. And he had a broken leg when we got there. And it's because the reason she was looking for someone to look after him is that it was actually her daughter's dog. And her daughter had taken like a gap year, gone traveling or whatever. And she was a nurse that worked, nurse crazy hours. And so the dog was left with her while the daughter was traveling. And she just couldn't care for the dog. She realized that she couldn't care for him. And she was at work. There was a giant storm. He was locked in the house. And he like smashed a window on a 2nd-story balcony and jumped out of the balcony to get to the neighbor's house. And he broke his leg doing it. And so that was when she was like, okay, it's not like I can't care for this dog. Someone else has to take him. So we're the ones. So he's a cool dog, right? He's just a cool dude who's limping around on his broken leg. He's got his leg in a cast. She didn't want to give him to us.
So she had him fixed.
Yeah. Like,
Right,
his leg
okay,
was in
okay.
a cast, right?
I was hoping you weren't going to tell me that you rocked up there and he'd still had like a
No, like his leg's in a
floppy-
cast when we got there, right? And so it was at the back end of he got it off in a couple of weeks, and that's when we could take him. She was going to provide all of his food because she worked in a nursing home, and so there were all these like leftover meals that she would just freeze and store, and she was going to deliver to us every month. She'd come around and check on him because she wanted to stay connected with him and give us a month's worth of food to feed this dog. So we're like, this is the best fucking deal ever. This works perfectly. Well, you got to give this dog back, right, at the 12-month mark. So exactly like we thought would happen, we got kicked out of that house at the 12-month mark, right? They sold it and they fucked us. They fucked us really bad. If at the back end of your lease, they're not going to give you the opportunity to go month to month or sign a new lease, they can just kick you out.
Yep.
And about a month to go in the lease, I called the estate agent and was like, hey, are we cool? I'm happy to sign another lease or we can go month to month, whatever. The estate agent's like, yeah, we'll just go month to month. It's all fine. You're good to stay. All of our inspections were fine. Everything's good. 3 days before our lease ended, they called us and said the owner wants to sell the place. You guys have got to go. So we had, I think they gave us like 10 days or something to find a new place to live.
That's
and
diabolical.
there's 5 of us that live in this place. Like I get it. They had to sell the place. Man, I wish I bought that place. They sold that place for $1.4 million. It like now, I mean, it would be a $10 million house now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Oh, it's a big, beautiful house in Balmain. But anyway.
Yeah, Balmain prices are obscene.
Yeah. So anyway, we get booted. So I have to find a place to live. All of us that live there have decided like we're never going to find another house like this. We have to go our separate ways. So me and Jane are desperately trying to find a place for the dog. We can't find anywhere. And so we call the people and said, hey, like we've got to leave this place. It's potential that we're going to have to give Ernie back. She was like, yeah, the daughter will be home in a couple months. So if that's what you got to do, that's what you got to do. That's fine. I found this apartment in Coogee because we had to get a place at short notice. And I checked it. It was all sweet. I go to sign the lease and like Jane's crying as I leave to sign the lease. So I'm like, okay, fuck, we're not doing this. We have to find somewhere where we can keep the dog, even though knowing that we've only got another 2 months with this dog. I went to sign the lease. I said, hey, I can't sign it. But I said, I will take any house you've got and it doesn't matter how much it costs. I have to move into a house where I can keep this fucking dog. Mm-hmm. So fortunately they had this house, ended up in this other place. Anyway, a couple months later, they come to pick up Ernie, right? The daughters come home. He fucking won't leave, right? So now, mind you, this is a dog who loves to go in the car. His favorite thing is to go in the car. And, I didn't know shit about dogs. Mind you, also, this is a dog that bit me in the face so hard. He bit me. He was in the bed one night and I rolled over and like must have touched him in a way that he didn't like. And he bit me in the fucking face. And to the point where I actually had to pry his tooth out of my face. That scar there, like that scar is him hooking on.
I don't know. I've heard that story
dude,
before.
I had to actually pull his mouth open because he had a bit of a freak out. Like he was asleep and he got startled and just bit.
Don't you know the story, Let Sleeping Dogs Lie?
Yeah, exactly, right? But mind you, see, like the year that we had that dog, I was in Afghanistan for 6 months of that year and then I was probably gone 3 other of the months doing other shit around the place like pre-deployment stuff. So like me and the dog never were that close because he was Jane's dog and I was some dude that was there sometimes to that dog, right? So anyway, they come to pick him up. He won't go. He's like, nah. But this dog loves going in the car so much that one day when we lived in Balmain, I was walking down the street. This lady was unpacking her shopping and he jumped in the boot of her car. I tried to get him out. He growled at me like he threatened. And mind you, like this is 2005. I don't know shit about dogs, right? He's like, I'll bite you. Like, no worries. If you try and get me out of this car, I'll bite you. I had to say to this random lady in the street, I was like, me and you have to go for a lap around the block because Ernie wants to go for a ride in the car. Yep. This is how little I know about dogs at the time. So the dog loves going in the car. The owner comes to pick him up, this chick. He's happy to see her. He's like, oh, hey, come and meet my new owner. And it was big awkward. Like it was a really bizarre thing. And this chick's like, come on, Ernie, we're going home. And he's like, I am home, bitch. Like I ain't fucking going.
Yep.
So he refuses to leave, like flat out, like no way I'm living here with this chick.
But that's what I'm talking about when I referred to the malleability of dogs.
Yeah.
And how adjusted they can be in those situations. Like something that we cry over and say, oh, the dog's going to have a terrible life. The dog's going to suffer. He's going to have thoughts and feelings about this. They're like, no, fuck you.
Yeah.
You know,
well, he was happy.
If they're in a situation where their life, they get a glow up, in their opinion, they're fucking happy. They're stuck.
Yeah.
I don't know how to measure the neurological memories of a dog. I'm not a scientist, which I professed openly, and I will till the end of time. But I know what I know from what I see on the street. I know what I know from experience, and so do you. And so do countless other listeners who have had experience in animal raising and training and behavior. We know what we know because we're watching and we're observing on an ongoing basis. So when we see our dogs like this, to people who like making up stories about things, like they come up with this fantastic voyage about how a dog wants to be and how only its best life can be lived through them or their facilities or their properties or whatever it is. Yet there's fucking street dogs that are happily sit under a blanket with people who live on a fucking side of a street with a cup in their hand.
Yeah.
And the
dogs love that life.
they're with their person every fucking day, you know?
Remember that clip? Remember Steve-O from Jackass where he basically stole that dog from someone?
Yeah.
Because it followed him around. It's like, mate, that's how dogs live in places like that. That's totally normal. You didn't rescue that dog. You fucking stole it from someone. That's normal. I think he's in Nepal or somewhere like that, and the dog followed him back to the hotel because he gave it food.
He was a village dog or something, wasn't he?
Yeah. But like that would have been someone's dog.
Yeah, probably.
Someone's dog didn't come back that night, right?
Yeah.
Because it got food elsewhere, and then he fucking stole that dog.
Probably these poor Nepalese people are out rattling a candle 2 a.m. and Steve-O's fucking pinched their dog.
Yeah. But yeah, then Ernie lived, he died an old dog with us. But he was very much Jane's dog. Like he and I didn't know dogs, but I did at the back end. Like that's when I sort of got into training.
He would have been
a
great introductory teacher for you.
Oh, he
regardless
definitely,
of the professional side of it.
Yeah.
I've said to people who have even been clients here with problematic dogs, like when we get into those private stories about what they're enduring or what's happening in their life, I tell them, I said, I know it sounds like a tragedy right now. Like I get it, but let's think about what we're learning here together. Like you are learning something, even though this seems like a Greek tragedy at the moment. Like there is a learning process here, that there's some things here, some behaviors that you'll never, ever repeat again because now you know. And I said, because before you didn't know. You had no experience with that. But this dog, in what it's done, has given you experience here. And from that tragedy, there is a birthing of a lesson that you must pay attention to. And like after people get through the shock, they actually appreciate that we have that conversation. Because I said, we're going to talk about some hard shit because we need to in order to make sure that we can beat this issue and be able to convey to the council that you are now responsible and you have changed who you were and you understand what you need to do going forward. And I said, because if you don't repent and don't do these new skills and these new requirements after this for and from the dog, they're never going to forgive you. Like you're going to be black marked. And the next time something happens, you won't even need to come and see me. It will be in court. And then the magistrate will basically say, you've already had a chance before and now you've blown it. And I said, because the second time where very few, and I said, but I have been involved with people where they have reoffended, like they've ignored the advice, even though it's all been written out and played out for them. They've ignored the advice. They've gone off. The behavior is manifested again. They come crying to me and there's nothing I can do. I basically have to just stand there and say, there is no money you can throw at me that I can resolve this situation now. The barrister that I work with has rejected the case. They'll go to court with you, but it's basically just to fill their money with their account with money because they can't really do anything now because nobody will feel sympathy for you after this.
Yeah. Well, I think in terms of what Nikki asked us to talk about, I think that the reality of doesn't matter whether it's rescues or breeders or anything in between, I think that every homing of any dog should be on a case-by-case basis with the individuals. And, I think, of course, people can lie and there's shit people everywhere you go. But rather than, I think, a questionnaire of do you meet this criteria, I think that just a bunch of questions is probably like an interview, getting to know the person. And like I say, I live in the city. I live in a townhouse with a very small courtyard.
Yep.
But yet I raise, train and work with high-powered working dogs. And that tiny courtyard and my living situation doesn't impact my ability to manage and handle them in any way, shape or form.
Mate, if anyone's seen your social media, like even when you were away, Jane was posting pictures of Remco upside down on the couch. And
yeah, exactly. Right.
I think that was Jane who posted that, wasn't it?
Yeah. So normally when I'm gone, like if I go for a short while, he stays with her. But when I'm gone, he stays with Jazz.
Yeah.
And same deal. He lives upside down on her couch.
But I mean, on either one of your social medias, whether it's yours or Jane's, I've seen that dog upside down on the couch or, two little boys running around.
Yeah, but that's what I mean.
And
like,
Val and
if you looked at my living situation and just look at me as like an example, right? I work stupid hours because that's who I am. I live in a place that is not like on paper doesn't look like a great place for dogs to live in that I live in the city in a small yard, but this is my fucking whole life.
And you live right next door to a school where you go and walk your dogs and hang out and do training with
them. That's right. And now I have a big dog training facility on the same block. But
so
even
imagine if you were
that,
judged on that. Imagine if somebody...
I doubt I'd be able to rescue a dog. Like if you looked at my living situation, I doubt that I would be able to go into many rescues and say, hey,
And yet that dog would have one of the happiest homes on the face of the earth.
Yeah, so I think everything has to be individual, case by case.
Yeah. The one caveat that I want to throw in here at the end of it, the unfortunate reality is we still live in a world full of a lot of triggered people. And someday you can, with things that you say, you can be the saint one day and the sinner the next day. You and I are no stranger to that. But what I want to put in place is the caveat which I talked about. If anybody from any rescue facility heard you and me beating up on rescues, you heard entirely the wrong thing. I know so many people involved in rescues who have had a great partnership with, whether it's directly through the corporate side of it or the actual people that are doing it. I've trained multiples of people, like I'm talking close to 100 people or more through NDTF who are directly involved with some of the most prominent to some of the smallest rescue facilities you'll ever meet. And I have nothing but fucking love for all of them because they're doing, you know, some of these people open their own home, their houses get fucking trashed.
For sure.
Their family get put second to the dogs that they take into their house. Their own dogs play second fiddle to the dogs that they're trying to do because they're taking in other people's problematic dogs or even just dogs into their house. But these are strangers to them that come in and fuck their backyards up, cause problems, bite them, do all sorts of things. And yet these people never relent. They are just dedicated to the cause of it. So for you people, you can speak for yourself, but for me, I have nothing but fucking love and respect for you.
Yeah.
Because I know how incredible you are. And I also know that because you've gone through such difficulty and such turmoil with some of these dogs, that yes, you do want to make sure that these dogs go to the right place. The ire that I guess I'm directing towards is my experience firsthand and third party from other people against these malicious gatekeepers who are really narcissistic power brokers. And most of the people that I talk to in these organizations, they know who this person is and they really don't want them in there. It's like that one person in your company. You just think if only you weren't here, it's not so easy to get rid of you, but if only you weren't here, this would be a great place to work.
Yeah, for sure. All right, that's it.
Yeah.
Another episode, Canine Paradigm. As always, if you like what you hear, just like, rate, share, subscribe, do all that through the subscription service you download us from, then go to another one. They don't check. You're allowed to do it anywhere you want.
Before we finish, I had it playing in my head when you were talking about it, and I just have to get it out of my head. You know when you were talking about how you went down to a rescue facility and like they made it feel really uncomfortable for you? In my head, it kept playing out like that Austin Powers scene where Dr. Evil has a falling out with Mini-Me and he goes, all right, everybody out. Not you, number two.
Yeah.
Not you, Frau. Not you, Scotty. Not you, henchman, inconveniently turning knobs. And Mini-Me's like the only one left. It just had that in my head. But that's how they make you feel. It's like, yeah, we don't want anyone, but you can stay and you can stay and you're my favorite and you do everything I say and you drink the Kool-Aid.
You know, I had a real life experience similar to that once with an Afghani general who I'd had an argument with.
Yep.
And I, through the interpreter, he's speaking Dari. Or was he speaking Dari or Pashto? I can't remember. And I'm speaking to the interpreter, I was talking to him, and he and I were not seeing eye to eye. And I told the interpreter some shit to pass on to him, and the interpreter was like, I'm not saying that. Like, I'm not passing that on.
Yeah.
And then this guy, who I'm having the argument with and has to this point only spoken whichever Afghani dialect he was talking, looks at me and in his Oxford English accent says, everybody leave the room. And I go, that's me. I'm leaving the room. And he goes, not you. And I was like, oh, okay.
I see. Wanted you to stay.
It was me that got to stay. He says, just cuts to English immediately. Everybody leave the room. And I'm like, oh, that's me leaving the room. Had no idea you understood what I could say.
Yep.
And then he's like, not you, motherfucker.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. We got along. It was fine.
Cool.
We made friends.
Yeah.
All right, that's it. If you want to support the show, jump into Patreon. Couple bucks a month gets you a giant backlog of information, new stuff going forward. I just put something in there.
At the moment.
Yeah,
it's floundering a little bit.
Yeah, support the show, guys. Come on, help us out. Get some merch, t-shirts, tapestries, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Get some spring. There's links in the show notes.
Casey's got
stuff.
more tapestries than he knows what to do with.
He's got them all over the place. And if you want to get in touch with us, best way to do that is jump into the Facebook discussion group. Do that on Facebook. It's called the Canine Paradigm Discussion Group. You can search us up there, jump in there.
Yep.
Or you can shoot us an email. We are info@thecanineparadigm.com. Love you all. Goodbye.